So welcome to this session. This session is called Cover Your Assets. So many of our members have questions about insurance, and it can be a very complex issue, as we have, especially for us, as we have two organizations. So we have TourPros, who are destination experience operators who own their own tour operator business, be that themselves, be that a small fleet of vehicles, one vehicle, their own fleet of bikes, whatever that is. And also we have IATDG, who cater to tour guides and tour directors. So each with their own kind of different questions. And there's different insurance types. Everyone's got different needs. And on top of that, there's different regions and different states and different countries around the world who all have different rules and regulations. So again, for this session, this is predominantly US, North American based. If you're in other regions, please put it in the chat. We will absolutely get an answer to you if you've got a region specific question. So for this session, we wanted to primarily cover our destination experience operators, who are smaller single day tour operators and guiding businesses. Now, some just operate walking tours, others use vehicles. Some of you are just starting out and don't have insurance at all, don't know what you need. And some of you have already got insurance in place, but have probably never really paid much attention to the policy. If you're anything like me anyway. And some of you want to know how COVID-19 is going to impact the policy and should you get it renewed and, what we do. And some of you will have let the policy lapse because 2020 has been not the best year, and you may not have been able to afford it with the business being shut down, but you're hopeful to kind of relaunch it next year. So a variety of different scenarios for everybody. Everybody's going to be in a completely different situation. So I'd like to welcome the panel. We've got a fantastic panel for some real insurance heavyweights, and I'm delighted to welcome you onto this session. Thank you so much for your time, everybody. First of all, we've got Cameron Anna from Granite Insurance. Hi, Cameron. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Adam.
And we have Alistair McMillan-Bell and Paula Cartagena from Aeon. So thank you both for joining us too.
Hey, everybody.
Thanks, Adam. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon.
So just kind of to set the scene in terms of what the businesses do and how you operate. Paula, do you want to just kind of briefly tell us about Aeon and how you serve your customers?
Yes, thank you. So for those who may not be familiar with the Aeon Travel Professional Program, what we exclusively do is write professional liability policies designed specifically for the travel and tour industry. And within our program, we offer a combined policy form that includes both professional and general liability. You may also know professional liability as errors and omissions. And then the general liability component is designed to protect travel and tour companies against claims arising out of tour participant injuries, bodily injury, property damage, transportation accidents, food poisoning if visiting a restaurant, etc. The Aeon program has been around for over 40 years. Like I said, exclusively serving the travel and tour industry. We've been the program administrator, working with various carriers throughout those 40 years to continually innovate the product to make it conform to the industry's ever-changing needs. We are the in-house underwriters and claims examiners. So, from a liability standpoint, it's a very comprehensive and experienced coverage.
And just one point of clarification, Adam, I might just add, if I may, is that we are a US-centric business operator, so we don't have the licenses to underwrite policies outside of the United States.
Yeah, thank you for that. No, that's fine, and that kind of backs up what I said at the start in terms of if we've got questions from other regions, please put them in the chat, and we'll make sure that we answer them probably next week, if I'm honest. Cameron, over to you.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Adam, and thanks to everybody for joining. It's an honor to be here and share some of our wisdom with you. With the rest of the Aeon team as well. My name is Cameron Annis, Vice President and Partner, and also our National Practice Leader for the Adventure and Entertainment Division for Granite Insurance. We are also US based, where Paula and her team, focuses, probably more so on, and correct me if I'm wrong, Paula, but walking tours, things of that nature. Our primary bread and butter is the more adventurous operations. People who own their own fleet of vehicles. For example, you may operate a zip line tour, you may do ATV tours. When there's that more adventure aspect to things, that's definitely right up our alley and what we focus on. And not only are we focusing on the insurance aspect of things, we also focus on the risk management services of things. So for a lot of our clients being, people that have, vehicle fleets, things of that nature, we're able to partner with them to implement driver training programs, things of that nature, and also look at other risk management avenues in addition to just providing the insurance policy. So thanks for having us, guys.
No worries. Thank you. That's a really good overview of both your businesses. I appreciate that. Thank you. So kind of just to kick us off then, as we know, there's a whole host of tours and experiences that our members operate. Could you give us, and this might be difficult, I appreciate it, because it might be scenario based, but could you give us a base overview on the types of insurance that our small operators or experience hosts are going to need to have to best protect themselves as they sell their experiences? Paula, do you want to start?
Sure. So from a liability coverage standpoint, what tour operators, experience operators are going to absolutely want to look for is, like I said earlier, the professional liability component, which is also known as errors and omissions. And that coverage will provide coverage for scenarios like booking errors. If you are a U.S. operator, but you're moving your clients on international tours, visa passport issues, dissatisfaction with an accommodation or aspect of the tour, those types of scenarios would fall under professional liability policy. And the other component from liability would be general liability. This is definitely the greater exposure, higher risk, more severity type of claims. If your clients get injured on a tour that you are operating or that you are organizing for them, if they have a slip and fall while they're on a walking tour, if you are arranging food tasting and there's food poisoning at a stop that you're visiting, if they are participating in an excursion, that may have an adventure component and they get injured, or if you are hiring transportation through a third-party transportation provider and that transportation vehicle gets into an accident and your clients are injured, this is what a general liability policy is specifically designed to protect against. So it's definitely from a tour operator, experience operator standpoint, it is the most important piece of the puzzle there.
Okay, great. Thank you. Cameron, anything to add on that?
Yeah. And Paula did a phenomenal job addressing the general liability and errors and omissions policy. With smaller operators, that may be, those two policies may be the only two policies that you need. However, as you grow as an organization, these are some other things that, and as you change as an organization, these are some other things that you should be considering. For example, Paula touched on if you're hiring out third party, certainly fleets and transportation, that can be taken care of under the general liability policy. However, what happens when you buy that, that first vehicle? What do? You're transporting 10, 15, 20 people in a vehicle. In an off-road tour, we had a vehicle that there was wildlife in the middle of the road, and they backed up to avoid the wildlife. And guess what? They backed off. They backed off a ledge, where 10 people were injured in the auto. That was a $600,000 claim. So auto insurance is very important, and making sure that you have adequate limits to cover, not only just if one person is injured in that auto, but if 10 or 12 or 15 people are injured in that auto. A couple of other things which I'll talk about, as you grow as a company and as you get employees, a couple of other things become important. First of all, workers' compensation. What happens when, if one of your guides or one of your employees is injured on the job? In many states, when you get, depending on the state, it's required once you hire your first employee, you have to have that workers' compensation coverage. So obviously thinking about that, exploring those options. Additionally, whenever you add on, your first employee, another coverage you want to think about potentially is employment practices liability. And what this does is it protects you from employment-related claims such as discrimination in the hiring process, wrongful termination, harassment within the workplace, or a very common claim that's happened because of COVID is not providing a safe work environment. You did not, for example, if they sue you because you do not provide the proper protection equipment or things like that in the work environment, and they got COVID-19. And then the last thing that I'll mention, guys, and this is becoming even more important as a lot of tours go virtual. On most general liability policies is a cyber exclusion. Any business transacted over the internet is completely excluded. Well, as you go into the virtual environment, what are you doing over the internet now? In order to have coverage from that, you would need to look at the cyber liability policy. So there's just a couple of things that I'll touch on there as far as you grow as a company, things you should be thinking about.
Okay, thank you. Alistair, have you anything to add, or is it?
No, I think that was pretty much encapsulates it great. And I think Cameron hit on that specifically on that last point. I mean, we all read in the press the cyber liability issues and some of the large companies that have been penetrated. And if you guys are holding on credit card information or other personal information, you have to be very, very careful. There are laws across the world now, and there are penalties, et cetera, So I would just be, to Cameron's point, very conscientious if you are retaining any credit card, social security information. And frankly, I would look to most probably even suggest that you go through a third-party vendor that processes the credit card information, so you don't capture any of that.
Okay, that's brilliant. I mean, I'm trying to ask questions. I'm trying to ask really ignorant questions, which is luckily comes quite naturally to me. But one of my questions there, Cameron, and well, all of you actually, is the virtual tours. See, so I always think, because I'm from a pure operational background, right? my history has been operations, so I'm always thinking, do you need insurance to protect yourselves against some kind of incident or some financial loss? What are the risks of operating a virtual tour? Because I'm kind of ignorantly sat here going, well, if I'm doing a virtual tour, what possible risks are there that I would need insurance policy for?
That's a great question. I'll kind of start off and lead off with a couple of those examples. For example, say you do some type of facilitated team building activities as part of your service, and you're leading these team activities, and you've got 100 people on this Zoom call, and you are telling them to do physical activity, and they are injured during that physical activity. And that's a pretty common one there that, the insurance company under the general liability policy could say that is declined because it is over the internet. And probably the biggest one that we've seen is, people hacking into Zoom rooms and getting into Zoom presentations and posting very disturbing information. For example, think if you have 100 kids on a call, on a Zoom or a virtual tour, and somebody hacks in and posts this very indecent comment, you can about bet your bottom dollar that those parents of those kids are going to be suing you for ruining their child's. In the lawsuit, it's going to say ruining their life forever, and the damages that come with that. So those are just two that pop to mind from my perspective.
Yeah, same here for me. I mean, from a virtual tour exposure experience, I was going to say it's the cyber is the biggest exposure in that scenario, like Cameron had touched on.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, that's really interesting. And so
one thing people, it's always on people's minds, like, well, okay, well, what in the world does cyber liability cost? Just to throw out kind of some indications there, typically, $1 million cyber liability policy, minimum premiums for that is kind of the floor that they start at, maybe like $750. And that's annually. And that's kind of where we see the floor being, is where they start, where things happen. But you could get a smaller limit, such as $100,000 or something like that, for potentially less than that.
Okay, cost is definitely on my agenda of questions, I'm afraid, folks. So we'll come back to that. So how do you go about mitigating those risks? Because, okay, you can have a policy in place, you still got the risk. So how, in terms of the virtual world, what would you as insurers recommend that people do to mitigate those risks, to lessen the chance of those things happening?
Paula, do you want me to start there?
Yeah, if you want to start, because I don't have as much expertise in the cyber component as I do on the other liability pieces. So absolutely.
I understand there. One of the biggest things is incorporating the virtual experience into your work. You know, protecting yourself that way. For example, let's go back to the virtual team building. Number one, having that in your waiver. And number two, having a pre-check list of things that people need to do. Think ahead in the process. For example, going back to the team building example, do you have a checklist of a couple things of make sure the surrounding area is clear of obstacles where you are sitting at in this virtual team building thing. Make sure that you're not sitting on the edge of a mountain doing this tour building thing. They tell you to back up 20 steps and you do, and you fall off. Just very simplistic things like that is the biggest thing that comes to my mind. And it really just comes down to warning people. One of the biggest arguments in this industry is failure to warn. You do not tell me, you do not give me the understanding that this is what should be expected from the activity. We've got to educate and help people understand, or give them the opportunity to understand the risks associated with the activity.
Yeah. Hence why every cup of coffee has hot coffee written on it, right? It's the same principle.
Thank you, McDonald's.
Quick question in the chat that relates directly to that. Actually, Jesse's asked, if somebody hacks Zoom, wouldn't that be Zoom's responsibility?
Yeah, that's going back to the cyber. That's a great question, and it really depends on where did the breach happen. So, for example, is it your firewall that was defective, and that's where they entered? And that's also a lot of the questions. A lot of times when you're like, okay, well, our credit card information is somewhere else. Well, where did the breach happen? And I'll guarantee you, I've looked through so many reservation systems agreements, and all of them say we are not responsible for your client information. They, in that agreement, in that user agreement, they pass that back to you in that 15-page document that we all sign before reading.
Okay. Brilliant, thank you. Anything else on the virtual topic, just from any of you before we move on to the next question?
No.
Okay. Cameron, you mentioned vehicles there, and actually Paula, you did as well. I spoke to an operator a short while ago who was using a rental vehicle to take their customers on their tour around the city. Am I right in thinking that is potentially quite risky in terms of their liability, because they rented the vehicle just on a simple kind of consumer basis and on a commercial basis? Is there anything that operator is particularly doing wrong? Because in my mind that was red flags, but I'm not an insurance broker, so.
Yeah, I mean, from a tour operator standpoint, it is always preferable to, if you're not using your own fleet and having your own commercial auto, if you're going to be not owning vehicles, to hire a transportation company, because in that scenario you are dealing with companies who are properly insured, who have gone through the licensing and all the other regulations that come along with moving passengers. And you're then at that point transferring your risk. If you are going to take your group in a rental vehicle, 10 people, and you get into an accident, the liability solely rests on you as the operator. So yes, from our program standpoint, it is always the recommended avenue for our tour operators to hire transportation companies to mitigate and limit exposure on the auto side of things.
Brilliant.
That's a great point from a risk management perspective there, Paula, and just kind of elaborate a little bit more on the kind of the technicalities from an insurance perspective. If you're, Paula mentioned, hired vehicles. If you are doing that, you're hiring a company to transport people, or you're using what we would call a rented or non-owned vehicle. you need to make sure that your general liability policy is crafted to take care of that. And it would be as simple as adding hired and non-owned coverage under the general liability policy. Or the second avenue would be having a auto policy that just covers hired and non-owned vehicles, which you can do as well on that standalone policy. If you're renting them long-term, for example, say it's not, you're not going down to Hertz and renting them for a couple of days, but if you're renting them for 6 months or a year, a lot of those rental insurance companies will just say you need to get your own insurance for that. And you can actually just buy annual insurance on that vehicle, just like you would own it, which may be the most cost-effective way to go.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. So just kind of on a similar subject, if you're hiring a coach operator, so somebody who does it, that's their bread and butter, is to transport customers around. Can you speak to getting them to put you as a named person on their insurance policy? How does that work? And what's the best way of going about that if you're a relatively small operator?
If you are a small operator and you're primarily dealing with domestic transportation companies, meaning U.S. transportation companies, it should be a relatively simple ask. They are familiar with it. It's commonplace for transportation companies to issue certificates with additional insured status to the tour companies that they are contracting with. So it should not be a problem domestically in the States. If you are getting pushback from a transportation company here that they can't do that, I would say don't contract with them, because it should be simple. If you're a U.S. operator and you're working with international tour companies, it becomes a little bit more difficult depending on the region that you're dealing with. Western Europe, certificates of insurance are easier to obtain. If you're going to more remote destinations, it might be a bit more difficult. And if you do get them, their limits might not be the same as we would see here in the States, but it is possible. So what we would suggest is that you do put vendor selection procedures in place, dependent on the regions that you are operating your tours, and tailor them accordingly. That you would have, one set of rules for U.S. transportation companies, and as you do some research in what would be commonplace in some international destinations as far as licensing, insurance, compliance, etc., that you have another set of procedures for vendors that you're dealing with outside of the United States, if that's applicable.
Okay.
And just to that point, Paula, as well, I would definitely make sure you do your vendor selection very carefully, and reach out to colleagues that you know in the business that may have already previously selected a vendor in the transportation world. There are definitely companies out there that you do not want to associate yourselves with. And we can't give names, but there are very well represented companies with strong insurances and that have been in the industry and are known to a lot of people. They're the type of partners that you want. You don't want someone coming to you and offering you a sweet deal, and then you have an incident and you'll find that you're most probably there by yourself. And then to just secondarily mention, you definitely want to have an AI, digital insured status on that policy. But as you're contracting with them, you want to try and get an indemnification agreement included in that as well. And that gives you a complete 360 protection.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Having a ton of questions in the chat, which is amazing. So we're going to get to those quite soon. What are the key things to look out for in an insurance policy? I know that's a very broad question, but what are kind of some of the things that you see operators trip over, or you have seen operators trip over themselves in the past by not doing something that is really obvious in the policy? What should they be looking out for and thinking, I must put that in place, because if I don't, my insurance isn't going to pay out if I need to claim?
From a liability policy standpoint, I would say one of the things that you would definitely want to look out for is making sure that you are partnering with an insurance carrier that understands your industry. You definitely want to locate a program that understands the unique exposures, not only with travel companies, but more specifically tour companies, and that they understand what your business model is and that the policy will respond accordingly. A lot of times if an operator is purchasing a miscellaneous type of liability policy, the coverage does not extend to tour operations. So you have to be very careful to review the definitions of what the operations cover. And then make sure that if it does cover tour operations, that the general liability is included there. Most importantly, the bodily injury, property damage, if you have transportation exposure, hired and non-owned. So you want to look there and make sure that the carrier understands what you're doing and that coverage will apply accordingly. Some other things in the, you want to look for an occurrence form versus a claims made form, meaning that your policy, as long as an active policy was in place when the date of loss or occurrence happened, coverage will apply. Without getting very technical, a claims made form will only respond as long as you keep renewing coverage. So there's just some nuances in the type of policy forms that you want to look for as well.
Great, thank you.
Great point there, Paula. And a couple things I'll add on to that is, as Paula mentioned, you making sure you work with someone in this industry. That is huge. A lot of things we see with people who don't work in this industry is they'll give you a general liability policy, but it'll be specific to a certain location, meaning that it'll say, hey, here's your office, but you only have coverage at your office. Well, the weird thing is most of you guys don't do your business at the office. You're traveling around in tours and things of that nature. A couple of other things, some policies have waiver warranties on them, saying that, hey, if you can't produce the waiver at the time of the claim, then there is no coverage. So just being, considerate of that. And the other thing that I would encourage everybody to do, and I know this is the last thing in the world you want to do, is don't ask what's covered, ask what is not covered. Read the exclusions. That's the most important thing, is just read through those exclusions and ask questions. If you're like, I wonder why that's excluded. Why is that? Ask your agent or broker. They're there to educate you. They should be able to do that.
Great tip. Thank you. Alistair?
Yeah, no, that was great points. The only other observation I would say on some of those miscellaneous GL policies, there are jurisdictional limitations. So if you're an operator here, maybe doing some international work, they may not cover you internationally.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's a very good point. So if you're taking your customers outside of the territorial boundaries, you need to make sure that you've got adequate cover. Okay. Let's just hop over to the chat very quickly. Just kind of going to the bottom. So Audrey's asking, going back to the hire car rental to drive clients in Europe, does professional and general liability cover the clients? I'm not sure we can answer that one on this case because you guys are US based, but I will make sure we find out an answer for that. Question in relating to credit card processing. Is it better to use a third-party provider for credit card processing? So for example, Jesse uses PayPal and Stripe for online bookings and uses a privacy policy on the website. Is that sufficient?
Yeah.
100% use a third party. They've got the compliance things in place. They've got all of that handled. That's what they do. Let them do it. They're the professionals.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Dinah's saying that she sees some insurers issue rideshare policies to cover people driving for Uber and Lyft. Could that be extended to a tour guide?
My comment there is their policy is going to cover Uber and Lyft, but if you are named in that lawsuit, it will not provide you coverage whatsoever. You were not a named insured or additional insured on Uber or Lyft's insurance policy. Paula or Alistair, you got any comments there?
No, I don't have anything additional there. So if you're utilizing, ride share vehicles in the course of your tours, you're better off letting your participants arrange the ride share themselves. So you kind of take yourself out of the mix there. Yeah.
So another question, Jesse who's in Austin, Texas, says he's finding it very difficult to find somebody who can provide an umbrella policy for my captained boat rental tours business, and he doesn't know why. What some avenues that he could potentially go to? Can he come to you guys?
What was that? Sorry, can you just repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. He says, I'm finding it very difficult to find someone that can provide an umbrella policy for my captained boat rental tours business in Austin, Texas. I'm not sure why.
Yeah, I'll tell you, we handle a number of charter boat rentals, things of that nature. We handle several marinas, a lot of things like that. That's right up our alley. Paula, I don't know if you guys handle any of those types of operations.
We do not. No.
So why might it be difficult for him to find a provider, Cameron? Is it fairly specialized, or?
Marine insurance is very specialized. You're going to want somebody that specializes in the marine side of things, because marine liability is totally different than just your average legal liability for a person. You've got your own marine and watercraft liability laws that apply. Okay. The maritime laws.
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
And just to follow up, there are markets, right? There's the primary hull and machinery market to cover the physical asset, and then there's definitely marine liability markets in the US, and the other market would be London. But my suggestion would most probably go to a local broker and look for a wholesaler that has a facility into one of those markets. You should be able to find some excess capacity. I don't know what you're looking for, but there should be excess capacity out there. But as Cameron mentioned, you're subject to Jones Act, which is the Maritime Liability Convention in the United States, and it is very different to general liability. So you want to make sure that you get a maritime excess, not just a general liability excess, because you'll find in the small print that there's most probably a maritime exclusion.
Okay, thank you. Question from Simone. Beyond errors and omission general liability, where can I get non-hired vehicle auto insurance? So she's a small tour operator with a normal passenger vehicle, so 6 seats, and struggling to find a vehicle provider. I'm assuming that's vehicle insurance provider.
But I'm sorry, she's looking for non-owned, but she has her own vehicle?
So the question is, where can I get non-hired vehicle auto insurance? So I'm assuming that she has her own vehicle.
Okay. So Cameron, I'll let you take that one.
The easiest way is going to be to take that if you have a personal vehicle, sell it to the company and put it under a commercial auto policy. And with a commercial auto policy, you automatically, as long as it's structured right, it will come with hired and non-owned liability there. But if you want to sell it to the company for $1, or the other option, instead of selling it to the company, is just create a lease agreement where you personally are leasing it to the company. Get a commercial auto policy for that includes hired and non-owned auto.
Okay, great, thank you. And just had a question from Helen. Is it possible for a new tour business to obtain insurance, or do we need to have an established business with revenue first? I'm worried about the thought of operating my business without specific adventure travel insurance. So can she just operate the tours on the fly without being insured, or should she get insured first? I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but be good to hear from you guys.
We definitely wouldn't recommend the operating on the fly. But yes, it is possible. For our specific tour operator program, yes, we do take new companies in there, provided that when we conduct our underwriting review, they have certain risk management protocols in place. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So actually that kind of leads me into the next topic, and I'll kind of segue via this next question, which I think is related to that. Let me ask that question in a slightly different way. If you're a new operator, one of the kind of barriers to setting up and getting started is the cost of insurance, right? So, and quite frankly, especially this year, you're going to start a business. I mean, you start a business at the best of times, you're not 100% guaranteed that it's going to work for 12 months, right? But most insurance policies last for 12 months. So especially this time, what are the options for operators to say, look, can I have a policy for a month to give my business a go? Is that an option? Is there anywhere that's offering that kind of flexibility to help people start up?
I am not aware of any policies in the marketplace that will offer it on a per trip or seasonal type of basis that would offer the type of liability coverage that a tour or experience operator would need.
Okay.
I don't think they exist currently.
Okay.
Yeah, the only option to do that would be to take out an annual policy. And then a lot of insurance companies, obviously allow you to cancel those. And so you just be careful what you're kind of committed to up front. It's called a minimum earned premium. And with a lot of companies, that's set at 25%. So you're locked into at least 3 months worth there.
Okay. So ever the opportunist and optimistic person I am, do you think we should set that up? Could we do that? Could we set that up for our members? I don't know. Maybe we'll have a conversation offline about that, because I'm really interested in that, because I know certainly, I mean, different market, but here in the UK, that's was one of my barriers kind of 9 months ago, and then just COVID screwed me anyway. But having that ability to go, what, can I have an insurance policy for a couple of months to kind of see if I can get myself off the ground, really, without having to invest so much. But anyway, maybe we'll pick up that conversation another time, because I think that's interesting. So following on from that, loads of comments in the chat, and I know separately, how can people get their insurance premiums down? Like, without, okay, you can shop around, but you don't want a cheap insurance policy. That's not what I'm necessarily asking. But what are the steps that people can take? How can they come to the table to make you think, actually, this operation is a little bit less risky, and therefore the premium is going to be a little bit lower?
Go on, Paul.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. You can.
No, I'll start off and you can follow on.
Okay.
I think really, I mean, obviously, to what we've been discussing is there risk management, loss prevention approaches that an operator is taking, what history that they have of running a business, how the claims, have there been claims, how significant have those claims been? They all sort of go into the mix of underwriting, what kind of operation you're running, how adventurous it is. These are all risks that we assess in our algorithms, and all go into the underwriting methodology that we have. But I would also sort of state that the history of the business, we've been doing this for 40 years. We feel we have a pretty good warehouse of information from a pricing perspective, and what we find is that we have not really moved our rates. They've been very consistent because we have worked with the tour operators around those risk management, loss prevention approaches, which obviously help reduce or at the very least maintain a minimum premium level. But I know it's a big cost. I'm not disputing that there is definitely a steep climb as you start your business, and then you start adding all the relative costs, and then you add insurance to it. It tends to get a little overbearing. Paula?
Yeah, and just adding on to that, and more so for newer companies who are looking to get first-time policies, I would say, be proactive with the risk management approach. When you're completing applications and it's asking, do you vet your vendors? Do you ask for AI status? Do you have templates set up already for your booking terms and conditions, your liability waivers? If you come to the table with all of that already, it will help us, from the underwriting review, rather than us having to go back to you and saying, in order to consider you, we need you to do A through E. That's going to impact the rate too, because if we're seeing that, from your risk management approach, you have not put any plans in place at this point in time, and you're ready to buy a policy tomorrow, the pricing will, not that it will be different, but we won't be able to have a risk management flexibility if you have some of these other protocols already in place. So I would say be proactive. It'll help with the offering of insurance and then the rating as well.
Okay, thank you. Just quickly before Cameron Johnson, Michael's asked a question which I was going to ask. What's AI status mean? AI meaning?
Oh, I'm sorry, additional insured.
Okay. Additional insured. Thank you.
Yes, sorry about that.
That's okay. Cameron, what's your viewpoint on this?
Yeah, the biggest thing I will say is underwriters and insurance companies price for the unknown. The more they have to question and the more they don't know about your business, the more they're not comfortable with it, and the pricing reflects that. But with everything that you provide them, if they can feel comfortable with the risk, they see you've got your act together, you've got processes in place, all that stuff, that's reflected in the premium. The biggest issue right now is the auto insurance industry. I mean, it is very unprofitable from an insurance perspective. So you can guarantee if you own autos, they're going to want to see what's your driver training program, what's your qualifications, are you running motor vehicle reports on them, what violations disqualify them, are there cameras in the vehicle, or do you have tracking devices on the vehicles, all those types of things.
Okay, that's interesting. So so are you saying then that if an operator comes to you with kind of the big checklist in place of everything that they could possibly do to mitigate any risk and to prove that they've got policies and procedures and training in place and a good history of operating, that is going to lower the policy or not? Because I wasn't quite sure if that's exactly what you were saying.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Paula.
Oh, I was going to say, specific to our rating protocols, there are credits available for risk management procedures. So if we have an operator that comes to the table that has risk management procedures already in place, we will have the flexibility to offer credits based on that. Somebody who doesn't won't be available. The credits won't be available for them.
Sure. Okay. Thanks, Paula. Perfect. So we, as an association, TourPros and IATDG as well, can also help with those policies and processes and stuff in the background if you need it. So just get in touch. Last couple of minutes, let me have a quick look at some questions. Angela, is it true that if I buy a vehicle that was in an accident by the prior owner, that accident remains with the vehicle and affects insurance cost? That's a great question. Is that true?
That is completely inaccurate there from, all of our insurance companies. They look at, if you buy a vehicle, they look at, your experience in owning vehicles.
Okay. And why might vehicle insurance have skyrocketed this year? Because we're hearing from members that, their insurance has gone up in some cases by thousands of dollars and they're not operating any differently. And actually, because of bloody COVID, they're not operating half as much. So it's like, so what's the deal there, guys?
There's two issues. Number one, I think auto insurance is not priced based on the correct thing, and that's not a you issue. That's kind of an industry issue. It's priced per unit, not based off of mileage, which is kind of ridiculous. It's good when it's good, but right now it's bad when it's bad. The second issue is auto insurance has been unprofitable in the whole industry for the last 6 years because distracted driving claims are going up. You can't back into something and replace the bumper for $500 anymore. It's $3,000 because all the sensors are in it. People, before COVID, people were driving more. And so all those things lead to higher payouts, which is why auto insurance is trying to correct itself and become profitable again.
Okay.
Just a follow on from that. There have been some massive jury awards in the last few years with bus and coach transportations. I mean, you're talking about massive amounts of jury awards, and there was just a recent report from Travelers on that, just indicating how it impacted them in their financials. So just to re-emphasize, unfortunately, the market is upside down, and they're trying to crawl back up to the right side of it, and so we're seeing it across our portfolio at our business. That auto rates are just absolutely going through the roof.
Right. Okay. Okay. Listen, folks, thank you so much. We've reached our time limits. Thank you so much for some great information and some candid answers. I really appreciate it. I'm going to pop in the chat the link for the next session, which is all about digital marketing. So please join that now. We will follow up. There's a whole bunch of questions here, which we'll keep the text. We'll try and follow up as best we can. We have to go now because we've got another session starting in about 2 seconds time. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Everyone.
Cheers.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.